I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center and our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
A winter weather advisory this morning. Windy, frigid, blowing and drifting snow. Some snow and flurries, 1 to 2 inches today, high 19. It'll be clear, very cold tonight, low 0. And then sunshine, a frigid day tomorrow, the high at 17. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Currently 20 degrees along the lakefront. It is 17 right now at O'Hare. Your next news update is at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Don't miss the Ruger event at Shoot Point Blank, now through February 23rd. Save on all Ruger firearms, including the Ruger SR9C 9mm, starting at $279.99. Shop the Ruger event, in-store or online at shootpointblank.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
We'll be broadcasting from businesses around the Chicagoland region in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. And I think you can still go to businessbanktour.com if you want to submit your business.
We have some slots open.
For consideration.
Yes.
Interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. The White House fired me for my loyalty. Rich Higgins used to work at the National Security Council. You know, so much has been made that human donut George Conway has suggested they're going to have to impeach Trump again, for firing the Vindman brothers and the purge at NSC. And then now layer in, tweeting about Roger Stone's sentencing recommendation. But in terms of Vindman, Rich Higgins, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman wasn't the first staffer to be fired from President Trump's NSC and escorted from the premises by security. No, that would be him. I lost my job because I was loyal to the president. He signed up with Trump because Higgins liked Trump's commitment during the campaign to get the United States out of the quote-unquote endless wars. He said upon arriving to the National Security Council, I was shocked to find that resistance seemed to be the NSC's mission. Staffers were assigned to develop plans for ending U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. Instead, they came up with reasons why it couldn't be done. General H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, delivered them to the president, explained why he couldn't keep his campaign promises. There were a few Trump loyalists on staff, but we were outnumbered and mostly ignored. It was clear that the Trump presidency wouldn't succeed unless the resistance was defeated. That meant Obama holdovers had to be replaced by people who would carry out the new president's agenda. We few loyalists drew up a list. When General McMaster found out, he called an all-hands assembly and declared, there are no holdovers. We are all on the same team. Higgins wrote his own appraisal of the situation in the form of a memo in May 27, entitled POTUS and Political Warfare, which he shared with his colleagues. He hoped it would be read by people in power and take action, even maybe make its way to the president himself. Instead, staffers told me Trump called McMaster into his office to talk about the memo and tell him to get on it. That's what happened. And then Deputy National Security Advisor Ricky Waddell told me I was fired, and 2 Secret Service agents escorted me from the building. Nobody called me a whistleblower or demanded an investigation. Congress didn't invite me to testify. Editorialists and pundits didn't express outrage about my firing, which was as it should be. I served at the pleasure of the president. So did General McMaster and everyone else on the NSC staff. That includes Colonel Vindman. His position on the NSC was not an entitlement any more than mine was, and he, as a military man, should understand that. Whatever his view of Mr. Trump and his policies, his duty was to serve loyally until he felt he no longer could, then resign. Resistance while in uniform undermines good order and discipline and is especially dishonorable, as we're being told to stand and applaud Colonel Vindman in absentia during Democrat socialist debates, as Joe Biden did on Friday night. So go ahead. Go ahead, Conway and the gang. Go ahead and pursue your latest iteration of impeachment. Go ahead on the Stone sentencing recommendation and whistle AG Barr before your committees, Schiff and Nadler, go ahead and draft the latest articles of impeachment. Go ahead and bring out your paid CNN contributors like Andy McCabe, who's already admitted to lying to the FBI but hasn't been prosecuted. In other words, go ahead. Keep doing what you're doing. Unhinged, unserious, and unprincipled leftists. You couldn't be doing the president a bigger favor. For more on this, as well as the coming end of Joe Biden's third run for president,
so.
we're pleased to be joined by Ben Domenech. He is the publisher of The Federalist at Federalist.com. Ben, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Before we get to Biden, Roger Stone is a goofball, like there are a lot of goofballs that have surrounded Trump over the years. But is the president not entitled to comment on a sentencing recommendation for Roger Stone? Is that something that may be unorthodox, but certainly is not worthy of the hysteria that it has generated?
Hey, look, he's a weird dude. I think he's someone who's been around for a long time, and I think we have a good perspective on who he is. The president's, of course, totally entitled to express his opinion about this. I don't think that there's anybody, even people who are not fans of Roger Stone, I wouldn't include myself in that list, who thinks that 7 to 9 years is a normal recommendation for the kind of things that he's accused of. It's completely overblown, and I think that in this situation, you had a number of people, many of whom had connections to Robert Mueller and the investigation that was going on there, who were pressuring the DOJ to do this. And as soon as people learned about it, there was a reaction. And I think the Attorney General and the President are totally within bounds to say, hey, this is ridiculous. Let's not be too hasty here.
The sentence was so crazy. Even Jeffrey Toobin on CNN said it's ridiculous. 7 to 9 years. One, as Dan said earlier, rapists sometimes get just 4 years. But for him to publicly praise A.G. Barr over the ruling, does it look like he's, tipping the scales of justice to protect his friends?
I think it probably does look that way, but I do think in this situation, something like this was going to happen as soon as it became known anyway. I don't think the president even needed to say what he said in order to get this looked at, because the Attorney General, let's face it, is someone who is very much an institutionalist. He does not like the way that the agency has been shot through with a lot of different people who want to use it for their own political reasons to further what they believe, and he's very uncomfortable with that kind of thing. So, this was something where I think people both right and left, if they're being honest, would say that 7 to 9 years is ridiculous and it needed to be rolled back.
Just on the matter of the pending Durham report, since we're sort of in this space, Barr over the holidays sort of suggested it would be months before it would be finished. You sort of were left with the impression, at least I was, that you're looking at a spring-summer unveiling. I mean, every time Andy McCabe is on CNN or Jim Comey writes an op-ed in the Washington Post, it's like turning the knife for so many people who listen to politicians talk about the Trump not being above the law. Nobody's above the law, but it certainly seems that Comey and McCabe and Brennan and perhaps others, former Obama administration cabinet officers perhaps, are allowed to operate above the law. And they really want to see some sort of accounting at minimum and reckoning, more likely, with respect to some of these individuals before they vote in November.
Isn't it weird how you can get away with leaking, with violating policies, with, skirting the rules, just so long as the media likes you and views you as somebody who is a cherished source on background or otherwise within the government or outside of it? I mean, it's just, do these rules matter or do they not? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you had, Sandy Berger get in trouble for, stuffing documents into his socks, that were supposed to be, kept confidential. This is the sort of thing that these guys have gotten away with in impunity in ways that are, very obvious. McCabe in particular, it's insulting that anyone would be paying him as, a quote unquote trusted source on these matters, given how conflicted he is and given what we know about what he was willing to do and leak to the media in ways that really lead to higher levels of distrust in the institution. I think that there need to be ramifications for this. I think they need to happen before November, and I hope that the Durham report does a thorough reckoning when it comes to all of the different aspects of this that I think people still have a lot of serious questions about.
All right, let's move over to Joe Biden. You wrote an article, Why Joe Biden's Campaign is Collapsing. Is it ever possible for someone to come in fourth in Iowa, fifth in New Hampshire, and go on to win the Democratic nomination?
Well, there's first times for anything. I mean, this is something that historically has no precedent. But I think the thing we need to keep in mind here is, I was in South Carolina this weekend. I'll be heading back there in about 10 days to do coverage for the coming up primary at the end of the month. We've got 16 days now until that voting happens, and that's really the amount of time that Joe Biden has to turn things around. I don't think that he is 100% out of it, but the reality is that he's collapsing because the kind of people he appeals to no longer run the Democratic Party, even if they're an incredibly important part of the coalition. Biden has always appealed to more pragmatic minority voters across the South, the kind of people who are going to be voting on March 3rd, Super Tuesday, the kind of people who are voting in South Carolina on the 29th. But the fact is that the Democratic Party now is being run by woke white progressives who are overwhelmingly, higher earners and who don't particularly care for going backwards. They don't like the idea of having, this old white dude as their champion. They're much more inclined to, in this context, go for someone who is, in my view, a fake moderate like Pete Buttigieg, and do so out of desire for some kind of woke situation that benefits, a young gay candidate, more than someone who, on paper at least, still looks like the best competition that Democrats took forward to battle President Trump in the fall.
Yeah, with respect to Biden, though, I mean, particularly the halving of his black support in South Carolina and much of that going to Michael Bloomberg at present. It's interesting because how you describe Biden could have been his value proposition as a candidate, but he chose not to make it that much, as Bloomberg has spent so much of this campaign when he's, other than spending money on ads, apologizing for what he did as mayor of New York City, which is odd to me as well. But
yeah.
But Biden has been pulled so far to the left to mimic and pantomime the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren positions on imprisoning fossil fuel executives and then so many other issues. He no longer can really lay claim to this idea. He's sort of a practical, moderate, common sense guy who is just looking to advance your economic security and physical security concerns. That's just not that's not what he's offering voters. He's offering them sort of, like I said, sort of a cheap pantomime of the leftists in the race.
Yeah, I think that just speaks to how much the Overton window has shifted on all of these different aspects. I mean, at this point, defending Obamacare is basically a conservative position, and in this dynamic, he basically is facing so many people who have forced him into these positions of having to bend over or apologize for his record. It doesn't really matter that he, has this long record of success in an environment where people are more fascinated by the new. They don't particularly care if you have any kind of proven success in any kind of context. And that's something that has frankly been a huge defense for him. Having a resume is a problem. And if you look across the litany of all the different policy positions that he's been forced into, that all the other people have had to, raise their hands for, it's basically amounts to, getting rid of a border, taking extreme positions on gun rights, taking extreme positions on abortion, things that are, put every candidate into kind of a culture war context, when Biden himself has not been a culture warrior in terms of his record of being kind of a pro-business Democrat over the course of his career.
And former Clintonista Mark Penn, writing in The Hill, essentially said the same, and he's worried that that 2020 can be something akin to a repeat of 1972 with McGovern. I mean, it won't be winning only one state because of the nature of how things have changed with the electoral map in certain states that Trump couldn't win under any circumstances. But he's certainly suggesting that, you nominate Bernie Sanders and you're going to see a landslide for Trump and the Republicans.
I'm not sure that that's true. I do think that, we will have, I think, a competitive race in the fall, no matter who they do nominate. But I do think that we're going toward a point now where Bernie Sanders may go into the convention with a plurality of delegates, probably not a majority of delegates. And then the question becomes, does he have the claim to that nomination, or does a majority of non-Bernie people basically take it away from him? And what does that do to the Democratic coalition? Because from my perspective, that's going to be a really bloody conflict.
Yeah, and that real quickly, Michael Bloomberg yesterday, he had the backing of 5 prominent African-American leaders, the mayor of Houston. He campaigned in Tennessee. Today he's in North Carolina, tomorrow in Texas. Where does he fit in all of this?
I think that's the big question. We really don't know what it looks like on Super Tuesday in terms of the kind of competition he's going to be able to put out there. But you could see a lot of situations where the delegate counts are not winner take all this time around, and so you could see situations where he's coming in second or third, but he's getting delegates pretty consistently. And I think that that's something that could cause a lot of people a lot of consternation, especially given the fact that he is not someone who has had to go out there, shake hands in the icy weather and answer questions from people to this point. He's going to be in the first debate coming up within the next week, and that's going to be the first opportunity people get to see him answer any questions in this race.
He is Ben Domenech, publisher of the Federalist, Federalist.com. Ben, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
It may not be stomach issues.
For me, it's intense gas, or pain, or diarrhea, sometimes all at once, over and over.
I spent years with the symptoms, but could never figure it out.
No matter what I did, they never went away. So I decided to break it down for my doctor and get really specific about my symptoms.
We discovered that exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI, may be the reason for my stomach issues.
EPI is caused by my pancreas. It leads to diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools. The symptoms just don't go away.
But EPI can show up with even one symptom.
The good news? EPI is manageable.
But to get to the right diagnosis, you have to break it down for your doctor and get specific about the severity.